All right, good evening. I would like to call to order the Town of Haymarket Planning Commission regular meeting for Monday, November 19th, 2018. Roll call, please.
Larry.
Here.
Corral.
Here.
James. Shannon.
Here.
Cottle.
Here. All right, if we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and also remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moment of silence, please. All right, thank you. You may be seated. All right, first up is the approval of the minutes. If we could look at the work session on October 29th. All right, do I have a motion to accept the minutes for the work session on October 29th?
Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion that we approve the minutes for the work session on October 29th.
All right, thank you, sir. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, moving on. Planning Commission regular meeting minutes on the October 29. All right, do I have a motion to accept the minutes for the regular meeting on October 29?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept the regular meeting minutes from our October 29th, 2018 Planning Commission
All right,
meeting.
thank you, sir. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. All right, next up on our agenda is citizens' time. If you would like to speak to the Planning Commission, please come forward to the podium. Give us your name and address.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Maria Turner, Fayette Street. I have one comment, and then I would like to say something else. I was unaware that there was a public hearing the last meeting that you had. I would appreciate it if that would somehow be on the main page, if there is going to be a public hearing, either for you or for the town council. I only saw it after the fact as I drove past the bank building and actually contacted someone through the town and said, what's the public hearing about? Because you can't read them when you're driving. So there was no notice to anybody, and no one gets these papers where they're published. I know Fairfax County, they send out more information than what we do here, although I know that by state code you only have to do it 7 days ahead of time. That's not very much time. So I'd appreciate it if you were going to have a public hearing, to have it on the main splash page with maybe a link, because you really have to dig for it otherwise, or it's not there even, which I think was the case with this one. My comment is that it would have been made, had I been aware of the public hearing, that I'm not for a code amendment to allow a funeral home crematorium at that location. Years ago, the town voted against having it having one built in the vacant lot adjacent to the veterinarian. They determined that the traffic, although sporadic, would be here and there, and that the town more was wanting businesses that people would frequent more often, and that they wouldn't come and then just flee, basically. That it would be more of a vibrant business. I know I mentioned to the clerk that my daughter-in-law had been looking for a place to have a art studio, which she finally settled on Bristow because nothing was available here. And I think that that is what the town should be looking towards, is more vibrant stuff. I remember back when they tried to build one there next to the veterinarian, that the joke was, oh, Haymarket's really going to be dead now, because there was nothing ever going on. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Evening, Bob Weir, 6853 St. Paul Drive. I would note that I forwarded each of you this morning some suggested draft amendments and development standards for crematoria. I quite frankly, I found that was presented a little bit lacking. To follow up on what she just said, the issue of crematoria in the town has been an issue, and has been an issue several times over the last decade, not simply with the parcel next to the animal hospital. There was another parcel where it was considered, and in fact, this building was at one point in time being considered for a cremation facility. That being said, in reviewing the language that's presented and in reviewing other jurisdictions, I think you need to maintain crematoria both as a separate use and make it secondary to a funeral home use. You don't get in most jurisdictions, you don't get crematorium as a by right within a funeral home. It's almost always a secondary use that requires an SUP in addition to whatever's required for the funeral home. To that end, bringing forth this amendment, I mean, it comes up every couple of years, and I've heard it asserted that the lack of criteria and definitions within the current code is an oversight. That's not the case. It was deliberate. It was deliberate instructions from the town council several years ago. It was deliberate instructions to the people that redrafted the zoning ordinance. So the assertion that it's an oversight and just simply missing from our code by way of an oversight is incorrect. Lastly, I mean, the residents have spoken their minds several times, again, over the last couple of decades, particularly the last decade, about their disinterest in having a crematorium in town. Be that as it may, should the Planning Commission choose to forward an amendment to the Town Council for consideration, I would strongly suggest that you also forward some meaningful development standards regarding setbacks, traffic, and emissions, simply to protect the interests of the residents that have spoken previously. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. I'm Gifford Hampshire, and I represent the applicant who has proposed the zoning text amendment. I understand this will be coming up again later in your agenda. You sent to the zoning administrator the task to look at some development standards after last month's meeting, and I understand that she has looked at that in other jurisdictions and is reporting back to you. But I'd just like to make a couple points, and that is that my research indicates that the last time this came up, what was being proposed is that a funeral home be considered as a use by right in the B1 district. We are not proposing that. We are proposing it as a special use in the B1 district, and that's significant because that gives both the Planning Commission and the Town Council ample opportunity to impose conditions that are tailored to the individual site to protect the public. So that's a significant difference from 2013 when it was proposed as a use by right. And secondly, and I guess just to repeat the whole idea of development standards, I would submit to you that in a town of this size, development standards, a one-size-fit-all development standards, are not as effective as a special use permit where the Planning Commission and the Town Council can look at an individual site and consider conditions that would tailor the impact of the use to the surrounding community. So thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. All right, anyone else?
My name's Mike.
Okay, if you could step there, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Michael Turchin. Again, I am the applicant. We're a life celebration home. We have some people that love us and some people that, obviously aren't so fond we're going to be here. We're terrific neighbors. We're good for the community. And I hope that you look at this text amendment, please. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? All right, seeing none, we will close citizens' time. Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda items. Number 1, ZTA number 2018-001, zoning text amendment for crematory and funeral home definitions. I would like to reverse the order. Let's go ahead and do, unless there's any objections, let's do ZPA number 2018-058, 6721 Madison Street home remodel. Let's look at that one first, please.
So this application is in regards to a home that has been foreclosed for a little bit in a bit of disrepair. So the applicant is here tonight. They are proposing to add several additions on the back of the home. This is a little bit of a unique case where the zoning ordinance that we now have in place comes after the lot was originally defined, and the setbacks do not meet any of our current requirements. So we need to look at how, do you look on page 12, right after the report? You can see it's a corner lot here on Madison Street and Madison Court. You can see where the home sits, and then you'll also see that due to the right-of-way, you'll see the edge of the pavement, and then you'll see the actual property line, and then all of your setbacks are marked out here. So the additions are not actually going to expand the existing house. If you were to just draw a little rectangle around it, it's going to take it from a T shape, the white part, add the 2 gray boxes and make it more of a rectangle. In general, the additions are, they're going to enhance the house and make it, a lot more livable, and they're going to redo the entire outside. So I think it's something that the commission should look at waiving those setbacks, as they're going to keep within kind of what's currently existing. But I do want to invite the applicant up to explain more, if they so please. It's Mr. Bounds.
Evening.
He's the contractor.
Yeah, we're just planning.
Sir, if you could just give us your full name,
Yeah,
please.
Jeff Bounds, I'm a resident here in Haymarket.
Thank you.
I'm the contractor. I've got the homeowner here as well. The owner has purchased the property with the intent to develop the property, make it more livable as an investment. We were actually taking it from the shape, as Emily said, to make it more of a ranch-style home, and completely remodel the exterior and the interior completely, so it will look completely different from the way it does now, including all the exterior, new garage, 2-car garage, which is on the plan as well. So we're hoping that setback-wise, we're right on the borderline. We're hoping that that could be something that the board would consider.
All right, thank you.
Does the commission have any concerns over waiving these setbacks?
If I can speak, Mr. Chairman, I don't have a problem with the setback. Has the ARB seen this?
Yes, so the ARB has seen it. Ayush can fill you in on that a little bit more if you wish, but they have looked at all of the exterior materials, the additions, the garage, and the porches.
Okay, and what was,
There was a general approval for what the applicant was trying to do. I think we approved it with some conditions as to going with the ARB guidelines that we generally have.
okay.
But other than that, I don't think ARB had any issues and was approved.
I don't have any other issues with the setback. It's minimal. I don't think it's going to affect anything.
All right, sir, any comments?
I don't have a problem.
It looks good to me, just looking at the setbacks. I mean, these are more in some other places in our town.
Absolutely.
They're more than what's in my community. And this, there are 3 adjoining communities right behind it, right? Well, those 3, correct?
This home will back up to a few on Madison Court and then a few on Madison Street. So it doesn't quite back up to the other neighborhoods.
Okay. All right, so we have a draft motion here. And staff recommendations were on packet page 11.
What I would recommend adding, I left some dashes there at the end of the draft motion. So I would just say, due to the predefined property lines prior to the ordinance, or you can just cut it off and leave it to include waiving the setback requirements, period.
Yeah, I think that's
Sufficient for the commission.
I think that's where I would stop that.
To include waiving the setback requirements.
Yeah, period.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that. Does anybody else have a problem with that? All right, do we have a motion? Who would like to make a motion?
I will make a motion that to approve certificate of appropriateness ZP number 2018-058 for the exterior additions at 6721 Madison Street to include waiving the setback requirements.
All right, thank you, sir. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, let's do a roll call vote, please.
Laurie,
Yes.
Terrell,
Yes.
Shannon,
Yes.
Cottle.
Yes. All right, motion carries. All right, thank you. Yes, sir. All right, so let's move on, go back to ZTA, number 2018-001, zoning text amendment for crematory and funeral home definitions. All right, Emily?
So, just to update Nick, since he wasn't here at our last meeting, we had a public hearing based on some citizens' comments. The commission requested that I look into performance standards for the crematory uses in this general area and surrounding jurisdictions. So based on that, I provided a brief summary on page 8. I was able to only find the performance standards in the town of Leesburg. Most of the other surrounding jurisdictions do not have the definition crematory in their zoning ordinances. They don't allow them. So this is what I was able to find. It's on page 8A through F. And generally speaking, it's about the outdoor storage of the fuels. It's about the setback of the fuel storage containers. It's about the environmental quality air permit that is required. In the town of Leesburg, they required to see this permit before they actually sign off on everything. And then it also has that the facility shall be solely used for the cremation of human corpses and shall not be used for the disposition of any animal remains or medical waste. I know there's currently, well, there's stuff out there with the EPA that humans are not classified as solid waste, so there's a bit of that debate here, and I think this is what E starts to address. And then crematory facilities shall be limited to no more than 25% of the total gross floor area of the funeral home. So these are the ones that I was able to find. I'm happy to talk about them with everyone. I recommend that we talk about them, the commission, amongst yourselves as well. If there's anything that you are missing that you feel needs to still be addressed, if you have questions for the applicant, for myself.
I guess the question I would have, you said that you looked in other jurisdictions and they don't allow them. Which jurisdictions would those be?
So I looked up town of Purcellville. I looked into the town of Luray. I looked into the town of Herndon. I want to say Vienna. I went with mainly the towns, town of Middleburg as well, because that's where we are at. We're not quite a city. We don't have enough residents, and so I did not look into the city of Manassas as closely, but Prince William County does have crematories. As you see, the applicant has drafted their zoning text amendment based on Prince William County standards. So that's out there, but the performance standards are not there.
Do you have any idea why Purcellville, Luray, Herndon, Vienna, and Middleburg don't allow them?
I would, if I were to take a guess, I would say it's because of the use and pretty much the stigma that's gone with this type of use. I think just as many towns have done, they deliberately leave out a crematory. I think there's a lot of environmental concerns, and so to protect their citizens, they choose not to put them in the zoning ordinance due to the environmental concerns, plumes. There's a lot out there about air particles and, what are you actually burning? How do you know? Things like that.
Mr. Chairman, something comes to my mind right away, but I'd like to ask Giff if he could to come up.
Sure.
Looking at the town of Leesburg, one of the things they have is very important, and I need to know if this has been done. The Virginia DEQ air permit, has that been done at all?
That will be done. It has to be done prior to opening, but it's part
Okay.
of it. It's a separate permit process.
At what point in time would that be done?
That would be done as part of the site plan prior to opening.
Only question I have.
While there's a pause, Mr. Chairman, my client represented me during the discussion here, the town of Herndon does have crematory in their town. And that we think that a lot of the reason why the towns have not yet specifically addressed them is that they are a relatively new use. But they certainly do exist in the town of Herndon. They also, for the record, exist in the city of Manassas. There are two in the city of Manassas. Pierce Funeral Home and Baker Blasius, I believe, Baker Post, also has a crematory. I'm pretty sure of that, but at least Pierce does. As Emily stated, Prince William County does as well. Both those ordinances specifically allow crematory as a secondary use. As Mr. Weir said, it is a secondary use to a funeral home. They're not allowed as independent uses.
Is this the first property you've looked at? Or have you tried in other towns to purchase property and go through the process?
No, this is the first.
The first time? I was just wondering why Haymarket? Yeah, sure.
Okay. So again, my name is Michael Church, and I am Mount Castle Church Life Celebration Homes. We have two locations in the Woodbridge and Dale City, where we've been operating since the 60s. And the reason why I decided to come out to out to Haymarket, sorry, I've turned it on the brain, is because many of our client families decided to move west, so they can see the pretty mountains and out here. And I kept getting these phone calls. Hey, Mom died, but gosh, I really wish you were out this way, but we went with somebody, we drove out to Mosier or some other place. And that just sort of planted the seed with me. So that's really how I stumbled into Haymarket. But again, what we're asking for is for a crematory to be a secondary use, not a primary use. And in the 27 years that I've been associated with Mount Castle Church Life Celebration Homes, I mean, we have a spotless record. There's not been one complaint to the Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers, to the supervisors, to the DEQ. As a matter of fact, I actually train some of the new employees from the DEQs because they're not quite sure what they need to look for. So I find that to be sort of in the highest compliment that they come to me to say, hey, what are the standards? When we go inspect, what are some of the things we should look for? As a past president of the Virginia Funeral Directors Association, it's one of the things, we run an above-board business. So in answer to the question, Haymarket's the first town I looked at, and I really looked at it just because our client families kept calling me and saying, we moved out to this way, and we really wish you were out here. So that's
So
why I'm here.
how long have you been in the business, you said?
27 years.
27, and you had a crematorium at
Yes,
each
sir.
one of your locations, okay?
Yes, sir.
So could you walk us through a little bit about what's the process? Because I think that's where a lot of the concerns from, from us as well as from the citizens. I'm kind of like, what is, because I've read some, and I'll go through some of my other concerns, but I just want to hear what's the process for air quality and things like that?
Okay.
And the permits.
So, we have to apply with the state, and then every other year we have to file records with the DEQ, just stating that what the annual consumption is. And the Virginia Board of Funeral Directors, they come in and inspect us at least once every 3 years. Usually with crematories, it's a little bit more. Funeral homes with crematories, it's a little bit more often. About every other year, they're also inspecting us just to make sure, are you having maintenance done to the machine? Is there any usage? And in Dale City, my crematory was built in 1987. Huge, and you can't, it backs up to townhouses. I mean, there are townhouse communities all around us. I think one of you even stated you have an uncle or something that has a funeral home with crematory in it. And it's very much the same with us. You wouldn't know if cremation was taking place unless you actually knew a cremation was taking place. They're odorless. There's no smoke that comes out the vent. There's no sound associated with it. And for me, what matters to client families are three things. Where's it done? Can I see where it's done? They don't want to witness it, but they just want to see the equipment because they're curious. Can I see where it's done, and how do I know these are my loved one's ashes? And trucking somebody to another location or to another county and returning a bag of ashes just simply doesn't cut it for families. So having it on site really answers all three of those questions. As far as the actual footprint, the machine itself, I mean, they're about 8 feet wide by roughly 14 feet long. I mean, so they're not this huge mass of pieces of equipment.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, is there a requirement for active monitoring of air quality as well as filtering and because I guess there could be a standard here, but do you plan on doing like a gold standard? I mean, do you plan on going above and beyond? And what does that look like, and how can you assure the citizens that the air quality is not impacted?
So now with today, and I'm happy to provide you with stack tests done from other units built. I'm happy to provide you with any information you would like to. But in terms of today monitoring and so much done, it's done actually, I don't want to say electronically, but via the internet. So there are all these reports that let you know what your air quality is.
So it's actively being right outside the stack?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm reading what our town planner, which I appreciate her checking with Leesburg, says the facility shall be used solely for the cremation of human corpses. Have you heard of animals and stuff being in any of these crematoriums being incinerated?
Big business.
Pardon me?
Pet cremations is a big business. It's one I'm not in personally, but it is a very large
Because
business.
yours would not be pet, it would be human only.
Absolutely.
Now this, and this is, we Nick and I were just kind of talking about this earlier. I mean, I've had family members that have passed and cremated. And so this may sound kind of crazy, but what do you do with fillings, things like that? They don't burn.
Correct, but actually, but they do generally melt, and they're non-recoverable. So they become part of the cremated remains, or part of the ashes as you would know them.
I guess some of the things that I found, and it's a contentious subject. I'm sure you just being in the business, you know it's something that communities want to protect themselves against and their concerns. And just I have zero experience in it, and I'm just doing about an hour's worth of research. Things that came up were, the human remains weren't classified as human waste, and there's some on the opinion. So some of this is maybe opinion or fact, but if it's that, you know, it's not regulated as much or as closely as solid waste, and as well as, you know, the Cremation Association of North America. I don't know if you're familiar with that association.
I'm an active
You're probably a
member.
member of that, right? And so they've gone through a study. They did a study in 1999 on the Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, New York. It's like a 75-page document. And then you've got on the other side, there's Grassroots Community Awareness Network. Have you heard about them?
I have not.
Okay, so that seems to be communities that crop up across different states, and they help towns be informed. So the idea is, you know, we want to hear both sides of it and come to a consensus and a good decision with information. But there seems to be a lot of information out there, and I think that we would really want to get to the point where we can get a, you know, unemotional, fact-based the studies and what's really going on. So people that live nearby or in the town are sure that, you know, their family members are not going to be subjected to higher rates of cancer or birth defects or these type of things. So those are the questions that we need to
Sure.
have answered.
And as part of our special use permit application, we would address those issues. For right now, really what we're asking for is a zoning text amendment to say, hey, crematories can be a secondary use to a funeral home, to where you don't want in other counties where it's just where a crematory could be a standalone use. But in our application, we will address all of those concerns. I've actually met, and I don't believe you were at the last meeting.
No.
I had quite a bit of support here. I've actually met with everybody on Madison Street. I've had a couple of meetings with people of the town. Really just kind of taking their temperature, educating them a little bit about, hey, you know, this is what we do, this is how it's done, you know, and really just overcoming some of those fears. That, you know, not to throw Sheetz or McDonald's under the bus, but they put out far more pollutants than you know, a funeral home ever would. You know, people's wood-burning fireplace stoves put out more particulate matter than a funeral home or crematory would.
Okay.
So probably another dumb question, but explain to me, there's no type of plume or anything?
No.
Where does it go?
So it's burned off in a secondary chamber.
It is,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
okay.
Yeah, you actually have multiple flame sources during the cremation
It's the
process.
way we incinerated chemical weapons too in the military, so that's why I was wondering.
So
I don't have any.
I think another, you know, situation the town is right now is that we have a 10-plus year comprehensive plan that we're trying to go over and update too. So something to consider before we make any drastic, you know, changes, that maybe we want to consider the comprehensive plan, and is this going to fit into that plan or not? Is this something for us to think about?
That's being written, and we have input into that now.
Right.
I don't know if you've had an opportunity to review and provide any comments yet.
I did.
But- Okay.
I did.
Two were the only two.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, let me ask you this, or maybe to the town planner. If we move this forward to the town council with a recommendation for approval, we could base that pending a favorable DEQ quality air permit before it would actually be approved by the town. Is that correct?
Can you state that again?
Okay. If we forward this to the town council, and we can base, but before it would, even if the council approved it, they would still have to come back with the quality air permits and things before it would be final, before we would sign off to say approved.
So they would still have to come back and bring you a special use permit application for the use itself. So this will only, if you forward tonight's application to the council, that's saying to the council that we recommend, whatever your decision is, for the zoning text amendment to go this way. Council will hear it on the amendment of the ordinance. The applicant will then, based on that decision, come back with a SUP for the funeral home and/or the crematorium.
Okay, and that's where, if we weren't satisfied with the crematorium bit, it could be stopped there with not approving the SUP.
Correct, and you can
If-
also, at that time, put conditions that you want to see the DEQ permit in hand prior to.
Just as we, okay, I understand,
So
okay.
that's where you would start putting those conditions in. You can also, as part of the zoning text amendment, if it's to be referred to the town council, you can put other recommendations for additional performance standards, much like you would have in your packet. So other language and text that would be written into our ordinance, so that would make it tighter within our ordinance as well.
I'm really on the line on this, and the reason being, I've called around and I've checked and I've done some research myself. This request, more and more funeral homes, this is exactly where they're going. And I haven't found the percentage, but the percentage of cremations now are like 60% more than they were just 5 years ago. And I know a lot of that has to do with burial sites. I'll use Arlington National Cemetery. That's going to be my final resting place one day. They are encouraging to be cremated because they're short on land there. But the cremations and the funeral homes are, most of them coming in, this is exactly the route they're going.
Right, I think, and even when it comes to the environmental impact, I think, with burials, you'll have like leakage and all that other stuff. That's been known to happen over time with just rotting. So, and with embalming and all those chemicals, I mean, I think cremation, all in all, just kind of works better. I mean, I don't think it's an end-all be-all, but still, I think it's a better option than, cleaner option than burial. And, they have to be in compliance with, Virginia law, and I'm pretty sure with the EPA as well, so.
Mike, I'm sorry, go ahead. I know you were going to say something there.
I mean,
I was just going to say, I'm not opposed to forwarding this to the council, because I'll see it there as well. But there's just questions I have. I guess they would all be answered when they come in with SUP, the requirements that we're going to stipulate that they have to meet on the SUP. Is that correct? Okay.
Right, so this is only about the text right now.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't have a problem with the text. It's just when we see the SUP, that's when we'll have the decision and see what you present to us there, and then we have more questions. We'll continue to go back and forth. Let the town come in and give their opinions on the matter as well. But for just this beginning part, it's just the text about what's the definition of a funeral home. So I don't have a problem with just the text at this point.
I agree.
And Mr. Shannon, just back to your point, is that you're absolutely correct. The death care industry is changing, and all funeral homes today are having crematories built on site.
I'm probably a little skewed on this in some respects because I have a nephew who is a part owner of a funeral home in a small community in Pennsylvania, which on either side of their funeral home / crematory are residences. They're right across the street. And no offense to you, sir, but we've had those conversations. And he said you would never know that cremation is going on. There's no, you drive by a funeral home, you would never know. I think there's a lot of hysteria out there. There's going to be big black clouds. And I understand if you're not familiar with it, but he says, and I take him at his word, obviously we could get studies that there's nothing emitted, and even if something did come out, it'd be cleaner than the cars that go through town. Plus, they provide less traffic. And he said cremation, in the last 5 years, their business has like quadrupled. There's a lot less burials now, traditional burials, because of costs and land. And I would submit probably in the future that it's going to completely flip to what it has been. But I think putting forth a zoning text amendment, keep in mind it is a SUP, and this proposed site, I can't imagine a town our size having more than one funeral home. It's not like we're going to have a funeral home at every corner. I did talk to Marchand. He did, and I'll put him on the record, he did call me today and left a voicemail. I called him back. He would be supportive of it being down at this location, provided we did our research. He said at any B1, this would make the most sense. So, there are standards that these people have to get. It's just not like they open a business and they start cremating people. And I may be a little more familiar just because I have family, but my nephew assures me that it's completely safe. And again, they're going to have to come back with an SUP.
Right.
It's not like carte blanche, they leave here if we do the zoning text amendment. Because this just goes into our laws. Really doesn't affect their business at this point. It does in some respects, but when they have to make formal application. So to me, it just makes sense.
It was interesting at the last public hearing, too, we had
So
a
many
lot
forms.
more in favor of, and some of the folks I've talked to, probably 8 or 10 people at the most. I didn't find anybody opposed to it. They were just concerned about, it's a funeral home. And I said, well, yeah, we have to have them. We're going to all need one someday. So
And most small
I haven't really
towns have
found,
them.
yeah,
Indicative of a small town, Murray, in a lot of places, you go to pretty much any small town, Virginia, there's going to be a
Yeah.
funeral home. And they're usually one of the longest standing businesses in the town.
yeah.
I think part of it's just it being on Main Street, it being a little bit right there.
Well,
So
I
as
think
we
that
gotta
and
think
they're
about-
close to residential, but at the same time,
It has enough places to get out as well.
yeah, I don't believe it's going to be a traffic issue
Yeah.
there.
And that's a whole,
Traffic issue. I just mean, I think there is a stigma, unfortunately, with funeral homes. and-
Yeah.
And people, as they look at it, but if in the middle of downtown, is it going to impact future development around a funeral home because people don't feel like it's going to be as welcomed?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I
Because
don't-
we're talking about a lot of future development on Main Street. And as we walked down there, a couple months ago, a lot of things are going to be going on. So that's why I think not only just the environmental concern, but for us, as we're talking about a master plan 20 years from now, is that going to be something we're like, oh, I wish we didn't
Yeah.
do that?
And I'm not opposed to a funeral home at all. I'm not opposed to that in the least. I just want to see proof of certain things, the DEQ permit and stuff, but I'm confident that, before that SUP is approved, that they'll provide that and all. And I have no reason to question your experience, your professionalism and everything.
and there's going to be another public hearing for an SUP.
Yeah.
Right.
And
residents
another
gonna-
public hearing for the zoning text amendment with
Right,
council as
and
well.
there's going to be more checks and
Okay.
balances. And there were more citizens in favor
A lot more.
or opposed.
That's communication though, too. I mean, it only
Yes,
takes you
no, it
very
was-
quickly to be like, if you are in favor, you can get 10 of your friends to come, and if the other side doesn't hear, about it sounds like we have one citizen back there that didn't know about it,
It was
so.
posted on the property for 2 weeks as well as the website, so.
Which is a
And
requirement.
Yeah,
it
I-
was posted in the newspapers for 2 weeks prior as well as town hall, so.
Right, but I mean, I think that maybe it's a side about how, although we do that, and I'm sure it's like, what else can we do? Because citizens are citizens and people are people, right? They're busy, and then they're not thinking about it, and then when, after it gets decided, then they're like, oh, wait a minute, I would have gone to that, right? So I think that's more of a strategic communication challenge for us, because like all the things you just mentioned are put out there, but it's a one-way communication until somebody goes on those pages actively, they don't see it, right?
Yeah, I think that's a whole nother, I want to stick to
Yeah,
the
it is.
zoning. All
Yeah,
valid
this
is
points,
just the
but we
zoning
need to
text
stick to
amendment
the
now.
zoning
Okay.
text. That's a whole nother conversation.
Because this is all going to come up later
Right.
as well.
I just wanted to influences, because I heard you say, well, I heard a lot more in favors of, but you
Well,
just don't really know true,
Right,
you
I
know.
can only go by who was here.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't want that to
Right.
affect our decision-making when we don't really know a true, if you put it out to a survey of 100% of people, what is the real true
Right.
data point?
Well, I think it's like anything, it's education, because, I mean, the internet's the internet. So we need to see hard facts from the state and jurisdictions.
I agree.
So, all right, any other discussion, any other more questions?
I have, if the applicant doesn't mind speaking to the performance standards supplied by the town of Leesburg, specifically the fuel storage. What type of fuels are used for the cremation process? Where are they stored?
Natural gas.
Natural gas?
Yeah, I believe in those performance standards they're thinking of. You used to be able to use propane tanks, or I
Okay.
think you still can, where
Okay.
natural gas is not available. It would be my intention to use natural gas.
Okay,
So there would be no storage of
Okay.
gas
Okay.
on site.
So it'd just
Thank you.
basically be a gas line going
Yes, sir.
into the facility, just like a residential home.
Exactly, sir.
So there's not going to be any unsightly barrels out there, or things, petroleum, things of that nature.
No, sir.
Okay. I don't have anything else, Mr. Chairman. I'm
All
ready.
right, well, let's go around, Sarah, we'll start here and just go back one more time.
Any last questions?
Yes,
Does that
sir.
mean? I guess I would just suggest, like we have, there's lots of questions, so as you bring forth the first SUP, just bring as much info as possible, you know, like maybe the type of equipment and just the whole education, because I think many people don't understand the process. So the first time that we talk about it won't have to be, let's talk about next meeting, you know. I just suggest trying to get as much information out possible would help it speed it along to a decision.
I agree with what you said.
All good advice. All right. We have a draft, well, first of all, excuse me, should we, on your draft zoning text amendment, what do you suggest as the town planner to make any additions based upon the town of Leesburg? Should we tighten it up on the zoning text amendment?
one change I have, looking at it right now, the definition of crematory on page 7, an establishment containing a furnace for the purpose of reducing dead bodies to ashes by burning. I'd like to recommend that you specify in that definition human bodies.
Yeah.
I think that's one place for a change. So it would read, for the purpose of reducing dead human bodies by ashes by burning.
So that would be the condition,
Um,
correct? So if we made the recommendation to move forward to the town council, it would be providing,
It would be
The-
your recommendation of the zoning text amendment with the addition of that word in the within the
in the
definition.
definition.
Would that stop, say, I know he said that pet crematoriums are big business, would that stop pet crematoriums in the town?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Have to be human.
okay.
And then, as for the other standards from the town of Leesburg, I believe it was addressed when Mr. Church stated that natural gas would be used, so that will take out, based on the ones here in front of us,
Yeah.
that would take out
D.
B,
Yeah.
C, D,
Yeah, take out B, C, and D.
If you want to further tighten it up, you can make a performance standard that has the condition that natural gas would have to be used for the crematorium. Therefore, later down the line, let's just say another were to come in town or their plans were to change, it would have to use natural gas.
Well, what happens though if there's a better fuel in the future, and then that's better than natural gas?
Yeah.
I mean, who's to say?
So at the time of the SCP then,
Well, how about we take a quick recess, you go back and draft it rather than us try to write it, and come up with the draft motion. If you don't mind, let us look at it. Would 10 minutes be good enough for you?
Yes.
All right, let's take a 10-minute recess while the town planner makes a draft motion, if that's all right with the commission. All right,
Yes.
thank you. All right, we are back in session for the regularly scheduled meeting. So the town's planner has put forth a zoning text amendment to read, I move the planning commission forward ZTA number 2018-001 to the town council with a recommendation for approval with the revised crematory definition to read as follows, quote, crematory, an establishment of containing a furnace for the purpose of reducing dead human bodies to ashes by burning, end quote. All right, discussion on this.
I'm good with it.
Same.
Sir?
Yeah, I don't have an issue how that's written.
Okay. All right, any other discussion before I call for a motion?
Possibility, what if we look at, for the SUPs, for the B1, right, there's funeral home, but then we should have a separate second line item that talks about a crematorium as a second use within a funeral home, separating them out.
All right, we would cover that at our work session for the, I just lost my train of thought. Can you say that
Maybe that's not
again?
considered, so, like, we're discussing possibly having two separate line items under the SUP, under B1, funeral home, then also crematorium, you know, as a secondary use within a funeral home. Just because, I mean, it could be the situation where, what if we come forth and we have a SUP for just a funeral home without a crematorium, and we're like, okay, we approve it, one goes in, and then later on down the line, the definition allows a crematorium, and they could just add a crematorium without us approving it? Is that a
The
concern?
funeral home is not considered an SUP, correct?
It is.
It is.
It is,
SUP.
yes.
It is.
So, okay, so you're proposing it be two,
Two separate line items under the SUP.
got it.
So then you would need to further change the definition on page 7 that the applicants put forward. Funeral home establishments engaged in undertaking services such as preparing the dead for burial, as well as related accessory activities, including a crematory and arranging and managing funerals. Typical uses include funeral homes or mortuaries. You would need to take out crematory here and then have it so that the definition of crematory is added to the B1 zoning under special use permit.
Okay, so that's really a whole different motion.
Yes, which I can draft that if the commission wishes.
I understand where he's going with it.
The applicant's attorney wants to point out that would also allow for a separate use of a crematory and a B1 by special use permit.
Well, this is within a funeral home, so there'd be no standalone. Is that what you're was inferring? Yeah, as a secondary use only, never standalone.
May I be heard on that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
The proposal as it stands now specifically contemplates it as a secondary use to a funeral home, not as a separate use. So as we are proposing it to be an accessory to a funeral home as part of it. When the commission and the council consider that, they can decide on a case-by-case basis whether they want to allow the crematory as part of the funeral home or not. When our application comes forward, it will propose a crematory as part of the funeral home. but to allow a separate use or a separate use as a special use for a crematory would enable the town to approve a freestanding crematory without it being part of a funeral home, which is not what we understand the council would want to do.
No, I think, as we stated, a crematorium, second use within a funeral home, that's what we want to specify, and then a funeral home standalone by itself. I just think that there's a possibility where, in the definition, if we say funeral home includes cremation services, and you come forth and you apply just for a permit, just for a funeral home, and you're saying, I don't want a cremation, and we're like, okay, the town approves that, and then later on, they're like, well, per the definition, next year or 2 years, it's in the definition, cremation is included in a funeral home, I can just move forward and add one without the town's approval, right? You see how that could be an issue?
I don't think, it would not be an issue because the whole nature of a special use permit would confine the applicant to be constrained by the limitations of that special use permit, which would not include a crematory. They would have to come in for an amendment to that special use permit to allow a crematory.
But I think if the definition of funeral home adds and has cremation in it, why would that be required? Because you're saying the definition of the town says funeral home includes cremation. So how would you, I think that's why we could argue this. And if it's more clear, that if you have two separate line items and make it very clear about which funeral home you're going, either a funeral home without cremation or cremation as secondary use within a funeral home as two separate items.
You could do it
as SUP. I think that's something that would be a little more clear, so there isn't later on a possibility 5-10 years down the road that, hey, per the definition, cremation is part of a funeral home. I have a funeral home which didn't have cremation, but now I can just add it because it's part of the definition.
I submit that would not be possible because, again, when the council approves a special use permit, the applicant and the landowner is constrained by the limitations of that permit unless it's amended to add that crematory use. And to amend it, they would have to come back through the public hearing process before the planning commission and the council. However, that said, you could do it the way you suggest, and that is you could have two separate definitions, funeral home and funeral home with a crematory, and both being a special use, and the applicant would be able to apply for either one.
Right.
That's another way of doing it, but we think we get to the same end with what you have before you.
Emily, what about if we did this? I move the Planning Commission forward ZTA number 2018-001 to the Town Council with recommendation for approval with the revised crematory definition to read as follows, quote, crematory, an establishment containing a furnace for the purpose of reducing dead human bodies to ashes by burning as a secondary use to a funeral home.
To address Commissioner Polari's concerns, you could also add as a secondary use to a funeral home that must receive a special use permit or its own.
But it already requires an SUP.
So you just want to say as a secondary use.
Right now, in order to have a funeral home anywhere, it requires an SUP, correct?
Correct.
So given the fact that a funeral home is in SUP anyway, if we add it here, we're defining what a crematory is, or what the purpose of it is, what it's allowed to do, and if we add it as a secondary use to a funeral home, by definition, it's not the primary use.
Correct.
Yeah.
I just want to have as less wordsmithing as possible
Right.
to narrow it down. I think
I think that answers
His question, yeah.
your point. I think it.
it would clearly say an establishment containing furnace for a purpose of reducing dead human bodies to ashes by burning as a secondary use to a funeral home.
So as the text discusses funeral home, as it goes through the definition, it says as well as related accessory activities, including a crematory, ... So I think that's I guess my point, that in the definition of just a funeral home, if you approve just a funeral home when they ask for the SUP and they say no crematory, and we say the town approves, then later on, you could look at, well, what's the definition of a funeral home? Oh, well, as it written here, as it's proposed, it includes a crematory.
Right,
Do you
but
see how, then,
But
would they
that-
have to come back for an SUP to say, or an amendment?
you would have to
add
come
it?
back for an amended SUP. They just couldn't.
Well, couldn't I argue, because this is the way I write it, I said funeral home includes this. So you've approved me for a funeral home and it includes this. I'm just saying, I want to get us out of later on having an
Right.
argument over it. I think that's why if you have two separate line items on it, a funeral home without a cremation and a funeral home with cremation. Cremation as with a secondary, however you said it, secondary use with the funeral home. Obviously, never having cremation by itself.
I mean, what is the purpose? I guess I'm going back to this. What is the purpose? Are we saying that, I think we're all saying we don't want a standalone crematory in the town, right?
Correct.
So if we said as a secondary use to a funeral home, let's just say worst case scenario, we had a funeral home and they wanted to go back later and add a secondary use to, as a crematory. I don't understand necessarily why that would be a bad thing. If they wanted to add it, is because we still have in here, in the SUP, it would still be limited to space. There would still be restrictions, correct?
Yeah, I think.
And I think any SUP in town, I mean, who knows what the future holds, but, I mean, how many funeral homes would this town support? And in the meantime, if this does get approved by the town council, there's other businesses. I mean, the town is very close to being built out as it is.
I mean, maybe not a second one, but I mean, you could sell to somebody else, a new owner, and just do the definition. I don't know. I mean, I obviously, I think the intent of the applicant is to add a cremation, but I think just for the definition, we wanted to be clear that there's two separate situations, and that just because the definition of a funeral home includes a crematory, if we ever had a situation where, again, if maybe there was a funeral home that was approved without one, I, as the owner, I think I could look at this and say, well, you approved me as a funeral home, but it also includes a crematory. Could there be a situation where an owner could just add one just based off the definition that we have put into our ordinance?
You're talking about on
Yeah, so
page seven.
page 7, if you look at funeral home,
Removing as well as related accessory activities, including a crematorium. The rest of it stays.
and then having a separate line item for crematorium as a secondary use to a funeral home, as a SUP. So you would apply
I'd
for
like-
either one.
Let me read what the applicant has proposed. Funeral home definition, where it says, as well as related accessory activities such as a crematory if allowed by SUP and arranging and managing funerals. I think this would address the issue.
Yep,
Yeah.
I think so.
Do you want me to rework up the motion with that change in here as well? Or would you like for me to read it, and then one of the commissioners, if you guys are ready, can say so moved?
I think this is obviously really important. I think we should just have a clean draft
Okay.
to make sure. We'll take we'll make it a 5-minute recess.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you. All right, we are back in session. If the folks in the back could reduce your talking to a whisper so we don't hear you up front, that would be helpful. Thank you. All right, we have a new draft motion here. I move the Planning Commission forward ZTA number 2018-001 to the Town Council with a recommendation for approval with the revised definitions to read as follows. Quote, crematory, an establishment containing a furnace for the purpose, excuse me, of reducing dead human bodies to ashes by burning, end quote. Quote, funeral home, establishments engaged in undertaking services such as preparing the dead for burial, as well as related secondary accessory activities such as a crematory, if allowed by SUP, and arranging and managing funerals. Typical uses include funeral home or mortuaries, end quote. Mr. Shannon, you good with that?
I'm good with that.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
Sir?
Yes.
All right, do we have any other discussion? All right, do I have a motion? Somebody like to read this motion that we adopt this and send it up to the town council?
Sure. I move the Planning Commission forward ZTA number 2018-001 to the Town Council with a recommendation for approval with the revised definition to read as follows. Quote, crematory, an establishment containing a furnace for the purpose of reducing dead human bodies to ashes by burning, end quote. Quote, funeral home, establishments engaged in undertaking services such as preparing the dead for burial, as well as related secondary accessory activities such as a crematory, if allowed by SUP, and arranging and managing funerals. Typical uses include funeral home and mortuaries, end quote.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Emily, I want to thank you on behalf of the Planning Commission for the work that you did and doing the research that we asked you to do. It was helpful. And also your patience with us as we fleshed out this zoning text amendment. So thank you. All right, moving on, old business. Thank you guys for your time coming tonight.
Thank you.
All right, have a good evening, good Thanksgiving. All right, let's move on.
For old business, I would like to discuss the comprehensive plan updates and where we're at with that. So I'm working through the comments I have received. I've only received comments from 2 of the commissioners, so I'd like everyone to give it a look. If you have some time, maybe over the long weekend, I know it's not what you want to do, but if we could get those comments in by mid-December, I think that would be really helpful. I'd also like to schedule a work session where that's the only thing we have on the agenda that night. We don't have a regular meeting after that. I'm happy to go ahead and do it sometime in December, but I think we need to really focus on getting some changes done and coming and being ready to discuss everyone's concerns. So I think it would help to have those comments by that time.
Yeah, I think, as you and I traded thoughts a couple days ago, I think just doing a strict comp plan meeting by itself where there's no other business, and I would suggest we make it a 2-hour block, maybe do some dinner or something simple like a pizza or whatever. We could just kind of come in, roll up our sleeves, and really look at this, because when we finalize this, and it's always a living document, it's always going to be modified, but we just keep coming back to the same things over and over again, where if we could tighten up the comp plan, we'd spend a whole lot less time and waste a lot of people's less time, I guess I should say, debating And two, I think why getting comments is good. I think because we have, 3 new members, to really have you come in and give an overview of, from your professional vantage point of, what should be in the comp plan, what shouldn't be, because I think to offer comments, some of us have been doing this for a little while, not that we're experts by any stretch, but, as I read through it, just giving a good, thorough overview of the comp plan and the strengths and pitfalls that you see, I think would be really helpful. And if we could plan a 2-hour meeting, I think it'd be very helpful. I mean, what do the other commissioners think?
I would agree. I think it's important we get that document done and done right.
And over the last several years, when I was on the town council, we spent a lot of time on it. There's just been a lot of turnover, a lot of change. Not that it's a bad thing, it's just what happened. And it's always kind of the big project out there that we never really get to, even though we say we're going to. So, Emily, if we were to schedule something in December, earlier the better, think we could pull off a 2-hour meeting?
Yes, pulling off the date will be a harder challenge.
Yeah, I understand.
The 5th, let me get the right month. The 5th and the 11th, we have ARB meetings going on. The 3rd, we have town council. The 13th is open. The 10th is open. I have a conflict the 12th.
Our next meeting, regular meeting, would be on the 19th, correct?
17th.
17th. I'm sorry, yes, 17th.
Does the Monday prior, the 10th, does that work?
I'm open.
I mean, I'm looking at the 10th. I mean, it would work for me.
I'll be okay with that.
Let's go with the
I
10th.
mean, how about we do, for you guys that are commuting in from the Pentagon, if we do.
Hard.
Because we really want everybody here the whole time. If we did it 6:30 to 8:30, is that too late?
No, that's fine.
That'd be fine.
Fine with me.
It's almost 8:30 now.
Yeah.
Emily, would that work for you guys?
Yes.
You said that a little reluctantly. Does that work? I know it's a long day.
No,
It's a long day for
it's
all
fine.
of us. All right, so let's go on the 10th then. We'll go PC work session,
At 6:30?
6:30.
Is 6 too hard to make? Is that tough for you guys?
If you don't mind if I show up late by chance, as you leave the
We-
Pentagon,
Yeah, well, let's stay with 6:30 then.
I'd rather
'cause it's-
have everybody.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
like
Okay.
today was literally walked in at 6:02 because the way 66 is.
Is there anything in our budget where we could just do something simple, or even if we all just pitched in something?
Yeah.
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 can make it
We
work.
just get a couple pizzas brought in and just have a couple tables down here where we can just,
I'll drop the projector and we'll go through it and we'll have it so we can
Fine.
work on it.
Sure.
That works for us?
and I think getting direction from you, because you're going to bring a different perspective than the previous town planners.
I'll plan a little presentation and go through it for the first little bit. And kind of here's my perspective on it, here's what I think needs to change, what doesn't need to be in there, so forth and so on. And then we can go from there. So I'll have a handout for everyone. I'll give it to you guys the week of the week prior so you can look over it, compare it with the comp plan, and we can do that.
While we're on the comp plan, a mini ARB update, I guess, but I was talking to Marchant about the comp plan, and he asked whether or not we could move some of that responsibility to the ARB with regards to historical resources, design policies and sound land plan, implementing a sound land use plan, and then just general goals or objectives that we could talk to them about with regards to what they
Are
can
they
do.
not reviewing it?
They're not currently tasked with it, but I think that's a good recommendation that they take that entire chapter that's like historic Haymarket.
Yeah.
Forget exactly what it's called, but I think that would be a good cohesive thing for them to work on. They are also looking at their ARB guidelines at this time, so it'll
Yeah, I
be
just made the
nice to-
assumption they were doing that, so it's.
I understand the ARB, I just think from what we do, I mean, anything that comes in this town has to have layered approval, has to go through the comp plan, has to go through us, this body, it has to go through the ARB. Ultimate decision makers are the town council. My gut just tells me I don't see where the ARB, I think it's out of their swim lane to
Okay.
determine what goes in what part of the town. I think they have every right to say what it should look like, things of that nature, but
So when they update their guidelines, as we see fit, the parts that they update that are applicable to the comp plan, the planning commission will take care of inserting those in, and I will also make sure that it's tied in.
Yeah.
Mainly they're, like, things I'm thinking of off the top of my head, the historic structures list, once they update that, we'll put the new version in, so I think that'll be fine.
yeah, I just don't, that'd be like us as a body. I think when you start mixing the commissions, rules and responsibilities, I think it muddies the waters.
Okay.
That would be like us, them approving something and then us coming back and say, well, we disagree with the ARB. I mean, then you have, just adds another layer, which I don't think we need. That's
No, I'm just
my
talking
take.
about the areas that you just mentioned, the historic locations and things such as that.
And I think that will be all addressed, so once they get their guidelines up to date, it'll pretty much be taking that intro out, their structure list, and a couple other items, and kind of putting it in that chapter. So I think it'll all come together. I don't think it necessarily needs to be a specific work project for them.
And on the ARB, what are their guidelines for a historic? I mean, that's something that they need to determine, but
Right.
is age alone indicative of history, or does it have to have significance? Because that's been part of the issue over here for decades.
So that's part of what they'll be working on, in their update, is clarifying and tightening up that definition of what is historic, how is it defined, and going through all of those checkboxes.
Yeah, because I think as it stands, the only thing that requires it to be historic is it's standing for 50 years.
And with some of these subdivisions in Green Hill, in the very near future, are going to become
Yeah.
historic. So then somebody wants to put a deck, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's been part of the issue here. What is historic? There's a piece of junk shed out there, it's been there for 75 years. Maybe a little critical,
I think
but
it
I
needs to be
just,
clarified. I
it
agree
needs,
with you.
it's too wide
For sure.
open. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. All right, we good?
We're good.
All right, sorry about the tangent, but I thought it was important to say. All right, is there any more about the ARB? I do appreciate the work you all do, so don't take that as
No,
I
not at all,
don't.
not at all. There were questions about the playground, but those were we were updated on that by Emily in terms of what was going on with the playground and what we decided, which I hadn't gotten a chance to update them because of just how the scheduling worked with our meetings. There was discussions about the blighted house across the street and what to do with them as they come in for demolition, which I think Emily said would be December or January. Not too sure about that yet. And then the sign plan for McDonald's drive-through to make sure it's not overtly yellow, as is their logos and designs. And that's about it for the ARB. There's nothing much more other than that.
All right, sir, thank you. Mr. Shannon, Town Council update.
We had a work session. We discussed a couple things, but the big thing was the ARB decision for the denying the demo permit for 14801 Washington Street. I believe that's Ms. Leonard's residence.
Right.
During the meeting, we discussed, the town council, we overrode that and approved the demolition. We talked about the Veterans Banner presentation, and Senator Black was here. And this all stimulated from him and his idea. And you see them out here now, which are fantastic. I got mine in late, so mine won't be up till later on. But anyway, we just gave out the parade, the trophy presentations. We had a lot. This place was standing room only. We approved an ARB appointment, and that's primarily it. It was actually a very good meeting, attended, as I said, standing room only.
Cool.
It was a good meeting, so that's all.
All right, and not to prolong, can you give us a 2-minute update on the playground? Because I actually had a couple of people ask me about that.
So at our next meeting, I'm gonna bring you guys the final set of plans to approve, in regards to the placement, what we're asking for from council. So this is kind of, it's gonna be the commission's presentation to council. So it's not the site plans, it's not that, it's just here's our plan of what we wanna do, and then with the help of our town council liaison, Steve, we're gonna take it to the town council, present it, and explain everything, and request the funding be okayed and approved, so that we can move forward with the actual site plan and the purchasing of the playground. So I'm hoping to have all of that before the council for their, I think it's January 5th meeting, or 7th, I think it's 7th.
And you're still thinking this could potentially be installed by, say, April? Cool.
I do,
All
yeah.
right.
I've worked a little bit more with the playground representative. We got a little busy around Haymarket Day, but we touched base, and it's looking like it's about $25,000 for everything we want. Plus, I added another small little feature for infants. So, changing to wood chips definitely made the difference.
All
That's
right.
exciting, and to see that move forward, because we've talked about it for how many years,
Yeah.
and really just seeing it
Probably
move
about the
forward.
last 4 years.
Yeah. So it's exciting.
Well, I want to thank everybody for their patience. Thought we had good discussion, and appreciate everybody's thoughts, and I feel good about what we accomplished. So hope you all have a great Thanksgiving with family, drive safe, and with that said, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion that we adjourn.
Who wants the second? It didn't take long. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Good night.
You guys have a great Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Yeah, you guys as well. Yeah.
Don't eat too much turkey.